doesn't feel right to talk about anything until we talk about race. I feel like racism has absolutely no place in the Wiccan, spiritual, pagan, witchy community, and I know a lot of you watching this probably agree with that. That said, we can't ignore the fact that racists and neo-Nazis are very present in pagan movements, and we are not without our guilty areas either. You and I both, even though we might agree that racism has no place in this community, are both probably guilty of perpetuating some form of racism or a racist person or thought leader from this community. So obviously by this point I am speaking to other non-Black spiritualists, pagans, and witches in the community. I'm specifically looking to you to have this conversation about race, because Black people have to have it all the time. So since these Black Lives Matter protests have been going on, I have been feeling even more reflective of institutionalized racism and environmental justice. These are topics that are actually on my mind quite a lot. I am married to a Black man and I will be the mother to Black children. I have to admit, like, when I learned about all these things in the beginning, I was really shocked. So I grew up in a pretty much all-white area of Washington State. Washington State is not known for being particularly racially diverse. There were, I don't know, I don't really want to throw a percentage out there, but I would say like 80% of the people at my school were white and the other 20% were pretty much Hispanic. It wasn't until I went to college that I actually started meeting people who were of a variety of ethnicities. And it was really great for me because I always kind of felt a little left out as a Jewish person in a white area. But, you know, by looking the way I do, it was never too much of a barrier for my daily livelihood and growing up. I mean, I was bullied, of course, for like my hair and my nose and stuff, but like nothing huge. Just your occasional Holocaust joke. So when I actually started interacting with people of different backgrounds and from different parts of the US and different parts of the world, I learned a lot, and I haven't stopped learning, and it's pretty horrifying. Every layer that's pulled back of that onion, to have so many things shattered. I guess ideals you might have about leaders, family members, history, culture. I think especially as a West Coast liberal type, I grew up with a lot of the public education system teaching me things about the civil rights movement as if everything was fixed and healed, and you know, police brutality was not in my vocabulary well into university. I think a lot of young people today who even are growing up in white areas are really blessed for access to the internet and all that it provides as far as information and context. Like, I'm from the era of MySpace, so it was just music and like scene kid photos. So this whole idea of like citizen activism and citizen journalism was just not on the internet at that time. So that's like the context I'm coming from. I don't have answers for how to solve problems. I don't have answers for how to solve problems in the pagan community, but I do want to present a few things to you and myself also about racism that just might be embedded in the things that we learn and the texts that we look at, the people that we listen to in this community. The reason I'm making this video, even if you don't want to talk about race, is because pagans do not have a central authority. We have chosen this path because it is individualized, because it is responsive to your needs, because you are in charge of it. We have no like real authoritative body who can come out and say like, this is a standard for all of our institutions and all of our congregants or people, that we don't believe in this, that we are going to support this, we're going to make a commitment to be better at this. Like, there is no temple structure, you know, we don't have those religious economies that a lot of other major religions do in the pagan community. I mean, there might be like a local pagan church that you go to, or maybe you're in like a druid order, but they're so disconnected. It's not unified in the same way that, you know, Muslims, Catholics, Baptists have more of a central authority. So what does that mean for us? It means that any commitment that's going to be made by the pagan world has to be made by individuals, and that starts with you and me. Basically, I want to talk about how we can be not only better people of this earth, but also people who worship this earth, how we can be better pagans and spiritualists, how we can amplify our hearts and our energy around this time to be a source of healing for other people, a source of learning, inspiration to learn, inspiration to listen. If you are another white or white passing person, this is really important for you to learn how to do and not hide behind any label. Right now, if you are a spiritual person, you should be using those tools available to you in your practice to become stronger for those who need our advocacy. So I want to start with why paganism is, to me, inseparable from environmental justice and thus racial justice. If you are unfamiliar with the connection between environmental justice and racial justice, I really recommend that you read up on it, but as a quick and dirty explanation, the argument is that we as a society and as a corporate capitalist system and globalized world, I should say, we treat the environment in a very similar way that we treat people of minority races who technically aren't actually minority races. But there is an intersection between the racism perpetuated by these systems of corporate greed and industrialization and globalization. That thread has a through line with racism and how racism is perpetuated. Some examples that you can think of are like the plundering of the African continent by colonialists. That is an example of racial justice overlapping with environmental justice, the need to repair that damage. Another example might be Flint, Michigan, where people were exposed to a more toxic environment because of systemic racism. So those are just a couple examples of how these two things intertwine. So if you're a pagan, you probably came to this faith because of a respect for, adoration for, love for nature that was so strong that you wanted to turn that into worship. Polytheism for me is a way to celebrate all of the natural diversity of Earth, all the natural variation of Earth, and the people who perceive that Earth, the people who perceive that nature and record it, create art of it, speak about it, live off that land, people are just as much a part of that Earth system. And for me, that's where a lot of my world peace, one love energy really comes from, is this deep connection to the idea of a planetary sphere and being in an ecosystem that we share with everything from mosquitoes and bees and worms to birds to game to each other, that we are all interconnected, that we all come from the same molecules of life that Earth produced in the millions and millions of years ago. That might be sort of a wax poetic thing, but for me, a lot of that life force energy that inspires nature to exist is reaching a pinnacle of expression through the human consciousness. So that's where a lot of my love for people and for nature and for just reality comes from, is that deep-seated respect for awareness and for reality and for the material realm. It's exciting. It's really cool. So I guess to see evil in other people is frightening. To see destruction in other people is really frightening. And I think for a lot of pagans, or witches, spiritualists, whatever you want to call yourself, confronting evil in other people on such a systemic level, worldwide, nationwide, and throughout so much history, it's very unsettling. It shatters that just kumbaya energy. It kills the vibe. It hurts. But no matter how much it hurts to face the reality of racism and sexism and genuinely evil people, it's a lot harder for the victims of that evil to deal with it. Like, if you're struggling just to process the information, imagine living under that system. So to my non-Black folk out there, to the white people out there, white Jews like myself, how you feel about it doesn't change it. Does that make sense? Like, you can lay in bed and not give a shit, or you can march. On some level, like, sucks to suck, man. Like, you are not at risk in the same way as a black man in America of losing your life over this. Like, the cops are actually tracking down protesters through their social media in order to look for warrants and try to arrest people. Like, they did this before. There is a targeted evil on people right now. And I feel like if you are a pagan person, you have a spiritual duty, a moral duty, an ethical duty to be part of the healing process. Like, if this planetary sphere is a body and we are all one with nature, when you get a cut in the body, like, all the little moving parts that make up you come together to fix that wound. And this is a wound that has been around for a long time. And why aren't we stepping up to help heal that wound? Like, we have a responsibility to each other to take care of these things, to take care of other people. So I know that's really heavy. I know that's a lot. And it's never gonna not be heavy. It's not gonna go away in our lifetimes, but I think we owe it to each other, and we owe it to the next generation and generations to leave the world better than we found it. And this is a good first step. If you are a spiritual person, you have the ability to tap into supernatural forces, to tap into your craft for that extra boost of strength, of stamina, of speaking truth to power, of leaning in, of listening, of sharing energy, of creating healing spaces and circles, of creating art. You are a magical being, and I just feel like we as magical people owe it to the world to put more good out there. So yeah, I don't know what that looks like for everybody. I think it looks like something different for all of us. I know for me, I know I'm gonna have black children, and they're gonna move through the world in a way that I will never understand. But I have to be there for them. I have to be a mother. I have to be prepared for questions that I don't always know the answer to. And so a lot of my religious practice is with Aset, or Isis, who is this Egyptian mother goddess. She's a black woman. She is the queen of humanity, really, of the royal line. So for me, like, that's a really interesting source of strength. And just nourishment, I guess, on lessons on how to be a throne to my children, how to support them, how to hold them up. But that's just, my situation, so I don't know what yours is. Maybe you live in, like, I don't know, a really small town like I grew up in, and there is no one around you that doesn't already look like you, and you've never seen racism in person before. Maybe you're only finding out about this stuff through social media, or learning about it through social media. That's cool too. I just like to think of the whole world and every soul on it as a light bulb that hasn't turned on yet, and there's a point in every person's life where they can decide to flip on that light and be goodness, and be listening, and be an advocate, to fight for change, to put people over property, to put nature over property and greed, to spread that goodness and that love. So here are a few things that I just want to suggest. If you are a pagan who consumes stuff on the internet, who's sitting here they are. Here's my word vomited list of things that have been on my mind. Are you following other spiritual people who look different or believe differently than you? Are you missing out on an opportunity to learn about other traditions because you know that you can't consume it? You know you can't appropriate it, so why follow? Why learn? Are you really obsessed with pointing out how we're all the same, and that there's like a through line through all people and all cultures, and all at the end of the day, all humans are like exactly the same? Is that something that you perpetuate, or are you more appreciative of diversity? Are you really excited to learn about the ways that people differ from one another and teach one another different things, or different ways of looking at the world? Are you excited by diversity, or are you obsessed with trying to put people all in the same little box of experience? Are you aware of the Black history of your occult tradition? For example, If you are a tarot card slinger, you may or may not know that the illustrator of the Rider-Waite deck was a black woman. Her fireplace is actually at a bookstore in London that I went to. It's really cool. Learn about the people who helped establish your pagan path, whatever path you are on or whatever paths you are drawing from. Learn those people. Like, what are they known for? Did they write any scholarly papers? What other books did they publish? Learn about them. And maybe take a look and see what history might be sort of hidden behind that. On the same note, are you aware of all of the racists who may have helped author or lead your tradition? A lot of people are really surprised when they hear that Mahatma Gandhi was like super racist, but he was like pretty racist. If you are in any way involved with the occult, you probably know the names Aleister Crowley or Dion Fortune. These were also very racist people who had some really terrible things to say about others. So I don't know, take a look. I don't know how far back we are putting cancel culture these days. Sometimes it's like, oh, if it was before, like, I don't know, 1995, it's forgivable. I don't know. I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm saying I disagree with that. I think that people have always known that racism is wrong, and it's weird to say that suddenly in like the 90s everyone realized it was bad. I think that's stupid. I'm assuming now, if you're watching this video, you are starting to learn a lot about what it's like to be black in 21st century America. Take the time to also learn about 20th century America, 19th century, or go all the way back to the ancient world, of which we are so obsessed with as pagans. The ancient world was way more complicated than the History Channel makes it seem. The history of black people doesn't start with slavery. You owe it to your fellow human beings on this earth to know at least as much about them as you know about like the Harry Potter universe. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just assume that the history of China was, I don't know, like the Tang Dynasty, and that's it. Culture is a beautiful tapestry, and don't ever think that there is some segment you can take out and understand that culture fully. Like, learn about the context of now, of the context of time. Learn about how people got to where they are now today, and whether or not you think that is just or unjust. Like, if you wanna learn about why Black Lives Matter, but later this year you're supporting Columbus Day, you're probably not doing as much work as you could be doing. On a similar note, are you reading about pantheons that are not Western? And is there a reason why you haven't so far? Are you averse to pantheons that aren't Western? Not interested? Do you think that they're less valid than Western pantheons? That's something to explore. Are you appropriating anything right now? There's probably a lot of things in your practice that are a bit appropriative, so maybe learn about them, swallow that, deal with it as you will. Kind of going back to the pantheon thing, are you averse to people crossing pantheons? Does that piss you off or bug you? And if so, why? Are you devoted to one pantheon, maybe of your personal ethnic heritage, for reasons that might not be as pure as you would like others to think? Is there a thread of like ethnic puritanism that you feel or experience about your pagan pantheon or faith? I saved this one for last because I think this ties it back around to the neo-Nazis who are in the pagan community. This is a real problem. I'm not going to call out like any specific pagan paths or pantheons because I don't think that's fair. I think that the majority of us understand that they've been co-opted. But for those particular paths, they have gained a reputation. I cannot tell you how many posts there have been, like on Reddit, comments on YouTube that I've seen of people who are interested in a few specific pagan pantheons but are too afraid to engage in that community because of the reputation it has. I wasn't very specific, so what I'm talking about are white nationalist groups or movements that co-opt and use neo-pagan faiths as like rhetoric and recruitment tools. A white nationalist group will try to attract people to the movement through that sort of spiritual in. It's often about, ethnic heritage and preservation of an old tradition. So for a lot of white people who are trying to find a neo-pagan faith that works for them and maybe is even part of their own ethnic background, there's a lot of that rhetoric that can be encountered, especially like the Germanic faiths. And that's really difficult to navigate, and it's difficult to navigate that reputation. Honestly, if you are one of those people who is scared of participating in a pantheon, I would personally like to suggest that you go all the fuck in. You take that pantheon and run with it. You take that pagan pantheon and run with it, because the only way to shut out hatred is to stamp it out with an example and with leadership. And I think that if you want to work with a certain deity or a certain set of magical parameters inspired by a pagan faith, and you want to get a group together and you want to meet other people, you want to talk about it, like, go for it. Make content about it. Like, fill Pinterest. Oh my god, I'm really showing my age with that, but like, yeah, fill Pinterest. I still like Pinterest. Neo-Nazis don't deserve to own anything. Racists don't deserve to own anything. In my full and honest opinion, they have no right to any cultural property. They have relinquished a few I guess, privileges of being human being. Long story short, fuck Nazis, Black Lives Matter, and I hope you have a beautiful day, and I hope that this offered you something to chew on. I'll be back to making a few more videos soon. My husband and I are actually in the middle of house shopping. We just got a German Shepherd puppy, so I was going pretty good for like uploading a couple times, like in a row over a few weeks, and then life happened again. But I wanted to make this video first before I made a video about anything else, because I think that this is the most important thing we could probably talk about. So I hope this was useful to you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you very soon. Bye.